What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Groomer podcast. I'm your host, Alex Martin, and today I'm sitting down with my good buddy, Joe Z. I always say Z Joe because I can never pronounce your last name correctly. But Joe Z. Joe, for those of you guys that don't know, he's actually been in the pet industry for quite a while. I think the number is something like 1986. So long before I was born. Not to age you, Joe. But he has been in from developing high-end pet resorts to high-end grooming products. I mean, Joe's seen every corner of the industry. So, and most recently, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up. Joe joined the team as president of Paragon School of Pet Grooming and learntogroomdogs.com. He's been there since 2018, and they have been growing that thing like a rocket ship. So today is going to be a good one for business owners and want-to-be business owners. I brought Joe on because he's seen not only every corner of the grooming industry, but he's seen a lot of businesses. And I wanted him to share more about what makes the great ones stand out. Joe, thanks so much for coming on today, man. I know I gave a kind of loop around intro just because I know you personally. But did I miss anything for people that might not know you as well as I do?
No. First off, thanks for having me. Honored to be part of this effort. The only thing is to your point. Thanks for the dig. I appreciate that. Before you were born. In fact, most of you out there probably before most of you were born.
Right.
But the thing that almost 4 decades in the industry has afforded me is I've experienced a lot of the good, the bad, the ugly, the tough, the celebratory, the accomplishments, the challenges, all of those things. And what I always like to be able to say is, if through my failures, because I failed, I still fail every day. I still do something. Tomorrow I look back on yesterday at that time, and say I could have done that better. But from my failures can be your success. So that's why I appreciate being part of these types of dialogues, to just be able to spread that, because in grooming, we are still in a very much unprofessional profession.
For sure.
And how do we all elevate that to maximize everybody's income potential?
Absolutely. And I mean, to maximize our clients' satisfaction potential too, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, clients have a level of expectations that grows with all the other services that they get on a daily basis, right? And if we as an industry cannot keep up with the professionalism that other industries are offering, we're not offering our clients the best foot forward.
That's right. And what do our customers expect from us? Because they're comparing us to a bar. And it's really unfortunate, but in our industry, our customers almost discount that bar because of other pet industry experiences that our customers have had. So they're almost holding us against us. So how awesome would it be as if we're all focused on improving that and raising the bar? Now we're being compared to a heightened bar, which helps everybody. It helps the customer, confidence, trust, right? Peace of mind. But it helps us financially and emotionally be rewarded for what we truly do contribute.
Well, before we jump into today's topic, I'm curious on that note. I mean, why do you think that is? Why do you think that, you've been in the industry for so long? Or why do you think the industry is still relatively, let's call it, nascent in its professionalism journey?
And just like we're going to talk a lot about today, it's people, right? It's all of us, whether we are elevating or detracting, right? Whether we're adding to the professionalism or we're taking away from or harming the professionalism, right? There's certainly a time to be professional. There's certainly a time to be allowed to display your own personality, your self-expression, right? And then there's a time to serve the customer. And I think that the perfect mix is the blend of all of those. If any one of those is sort of out of proportion to the others, that's when things sort of get a little wonky, a little wobbly, especially when it comes to that balance between, I want to be me, but my customers want me to be who?
Right.
So I think there's a really cool mix that can happen with that. But Alex, it's all about in the services industry, whether it's pet services, hospitality, restaurant, whatever, it is all about people. It's all about people, ourselves included.
You're right. And I think you made a good point that whether we like it or not, we're the sum of the rest of the people around us, right? So the industry as a whole, if we want to start making changes, we've got to make those changes together, or at least the majority of us do. And I think
the best part is we can do that. We can do it.
Right. And I mean,
right there.
That's the mission of, Paragon of the Daily Groomer, right? Is to try and help everyone put their best foot forward as effortlessly as possible, because everyone's got hard jobs as it is. It's you don't want to keep adding to that plate. But I think you made a good point, and I think that's a good transition to the rest of the industry as a whole. Before we start talking about what great grooming businesses have in common, what they do better than the rest of us, I want you to set the baseline for us here. Set the context on what does the baseline grooming business look like today?
Yeah. So a baseline grooming, I mean, you've always got your fringe, right? You've got groomers and grooming salons and grooming businesses out there catering to the high-end consumer, right? The advanced grooming techniques, the creative grooming, the decorating of the dogs, the real specialty trims out there. So you have that fringe, and then you've got the fringe that is the strip 'em, dip 'em, and clip 'em kind of shops, right? And again, there's nothing
strip
wrong
'em,
with
dip 'em, and clip 'em. That is
strip
too
'em,
good.
dip 'em,
I'm
and clip
stealing
'em,
that,
right?
man.
Yeah. So, but and again, really, there's nothing wrong with either one of those fringes. But if you live in the fringes, and if you live in in those niche categories, there's approaches that you might have that are different from what is really the 80%, to your point, the 80% of grooming salons out there, or grooming businesses out there. What are their customers asking for, right? So the answer to this is what is the customer's expectations? The customer's expectations in 80% of the grooming businesses is a average to above average pet quality trim, right? So squeaky clean, tangle free, basic pet trim, right? I've often said that a grooming professional or grooming business that can master that, but then have above average customer experience skills, can pretty well write their own check in the industry.
So you master the average cut, as you just said, a great high quality bath, a tangle free, trimming cut. You master the average, right? You're not doing anything crazy, creative grooming, or anything even over the top from a breed standard perspective. You master the average cut, but you go above and beyond on the customer experience, and that sets you apart as a independent business.
That's right. Absolutely. And again, that's for that, to your point, that 80%, that core, right? Yeah. Now, does that mean, though, in order to provide that core, even a strip 'em, dip 'em, and clip 'em shop? Listen, there are places for that. Just like automobile manufacturers and brands, right? If I wanted to go out, not that I can, but if I wanted to go out and if I could afford a Lamborghini, right? I'd go out and buy a Lamborghini because I had certain needs. I had certain desires that I wanted a Lamborghini, right? Yeah. But I'd have to be able to afford it. That's like that top end grooming, right? That Lamborghini, experience. But could I still get from point A to point B if I was driving an entry level Chevy? Yeah, I could. Yeah. They both have steering wheels. They both have gas pedals. They both have brake pedals. So there's a place for both of those. But even in those, there are things you have to master. You do have to know about anatomy of a dog. You do have to know about angulation. You do have to know about muscle. You do have to know about, breed standards, right? Trimming to breed standards. Certainly the fundamentals. Just like a Lamborghini and an entry-level Chevy still have to abide by safety rules, safety laws and regulations. They still have to construct those there are similar construction there.
Sure.
But who's buying the middle of the road? That's the one where, to your point, that's the 80%.
I love it. So you just kind of touched on from a service perspective, what, the baseline grooming business looks like, right? Mastering the average. I love that term. Let's talk about from maybe like an organizational perspective. The average grooming business, do they have a, what I would call like a two-system setup, or they have a bather and a dedicated groomer? Do most of them have someone that does both, that bathes and grooms their own dogs? Do most of them, talk about the organizational perspective of what, again, this 80% looks like?
Sure. So, and I know we're going to get to some recommendations, right, for even a better business, but right now it is still all over the board, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see shops that do, or salons that do, the Henry Ford model, right? The assembly line, like somebody's prepping, somebody's bathing, somebody's drying, somebody's trimming. Sometimes that's one person does all of those. Sometimes it's multiple people, sometimes just two people. We've seen a lot of that, and that still exists. You see shops that say, listen, everybody does their own dog start to finish. And there's some reasons why. We're going to talk about those as we talk about the most ideal situation. But ultimately what we have to do is we have to say, how can we deliver the best service at a profitable result? Right? So that everybody's making money. Everybody feels good about the effort when they walk away. Also reducing stress, reducing injury, both to the pet and the pet groomer, right? So yeah, you see some bathers, some groomer assistants, some students, and sometimes even different tiers of groomers, right? You see entry-level groomer, new groomer, baby groomer, whatever. And then, you get to average groomer or standard groomer. And then there are some places that have elite groomers, right? So, because we are still unregulated, unlicensed, for the most part, it's right now kind of wild west.
Yeah, it's whatever you want. It's whatever you can handle, and unfortunately, there's no standards or certifications surrounding that. You mentioned, the line that stuck out to me there is providing great service and earning a profit. What are some maybe common financial pitfalls that people, maybe confuse the two, right? They might provide that great service and they might, think that they're doing justice, but they're not maybe maximizing their profit or even making a profit really at all.
Two things I think that are some of the main contributors to that is that grooming professionals have big hearts, right? That servant mentality, that service with a smile. We hope the smile's there, but it's right. I mean, I think in my experience, I've asked 9 out of 10 groomers, why did you get into grooming? They said, because I hate people, right? Maybe that's their feeling, but it's not the best answer, right?
Right.
And I don't know that they really hate people. I think they say that. But my point is, the financial pitfalls, wages, right? Our labor costs. And again, I'm talking to owners and operators, managers out there, right? You teed it up very well, saying who the perfect audience or want to be owner operator. Listen, labor is the number one cost center in any service business, especially in grooming. So that's one major pitfall. We've got to know how much and only how much can we spend in labor, because it could get out of control and you might not even realize it until all of a sudden you just really don't have a whole lot of money in the bank, right? So that's
you're working hard, your days are full, it feels like things are busy, it feels like your books are full, it feels like the business is growing, but you're right, at the end of the day you start looking at your money in the bank, you start looking at your profit margins, the tax bill comes out and you're like, wait a sec.
You take all of those costs and you start stacking them up in the day-to-day on any given Tuesday, right? On any given Tuesday, those aren't in your brain. What's in your brain, especially if you're an owner operator, like if you're a grooming professional who also owns the grooming business, I don't have to tell you, but you're working hard. You're not thinking about all these other things until when you do, all of a sudden, maybe some things are out of control. Wages are number one pitfall, right? Number one. The number two pitfall is not positioning your business well enough so that you can charge what you need to charge to be a profitable business. You are a for-profit business. You're not a non-profit business. So we've got to get some of these elements put together so that you can stand proud and charge what you need to, so that, I mean, really at the end of the day, the financial equation in any business, Alex, and you know this, money in, money out, money left. I mean, really, life is simple. People make it complicated. So money in, money out, money left. If that's how we can own and operate our business, and we'll share some thoughts around that to help your audience out with that. But ultimately, that's what it is. And right now, when you think of grooming, you think of haircuts. I mean, that's what I would think of. Somebody said, "Oh, I'm taking my dog in for grooming." I'm thinking that dog must be a haircut type of dog, a haircut breed, a doodle, a Shih Tzu, whatever. I think of grooming as that's an umbrella statement. And grooming has full service baths and full service grooms and then all of those add-ons around it, right? That full service bath is a huge miss with most grooming businesses.
Okay, well, let's talk about that once we get into what these great businesses have, because I would imagine that was an insight pulled from that.
Yep.
I'm curious, in the 80% of businesses, again, I just love your framing for, all right, hey, you do have fringes on both sides, but for the mass majority, that 80%, everyone tends to do stuff a certain way or follow certain patterns. I'm curious, from those 80%, what do people typically track? I mean, you made it sound like, all right, money in, money out, profit left. Are people typically, doing an okay job at tracking those three things right now? Or are people tracking their efficiency among their staff? Are people tracking the number of dogs per day? What are some of those like baseline metrics that you would expect the 80% of businesses today to track? Because I want to tee this up for once we get into a great business. I've heard you talk about some of the metrics that they should be tracking. So what are some of those baseline ones that people are tracking right now?
I think to answer part of your question, I think we do a better job now because most grooming businesses operate using some sort of CRM, some sort of software assistance, right? To help them manage their schedule, to manage their people, to process payroll, so today, snapshot today versus even 5 years ago, 6 years ago, there are still some groomers out there, and maybe this might be in the 80%. This might be in it's present in all business. There are still some grooming businesses out there writing appointments in a Sally's Beauty Supply appointment book with a pen or a pencil. They are keeping client records on 6x9 cards in a file drawer, right? Listen, you're talking to a pencil and paper kind of guy, right? I love pencil and paper. I like reading books, the actual book, right? I can't read from my phone or a Kindle or whatever, right? So I'm not saying, oh, I'm like, above and beyond, but people are using computer programs now. So that's a huge benefit.
To help them with tracking and help them with the metrics.
But most in that 80%, or most in really in 100% of the spectrum, most are maybe tracking the overall grooming revenue, the revenue in, right? Do they really take their total labor and just do a simple calculation of total labor divided by total revenue to come up with the wages to sales ratio? Probably not. Probably because it's not served up in most of those programs on one screen.
Right.
It takes a little bit of calculation, but money in, money out, money left. Right. So if you can at least take those three pillars, those three attributes, those three pieces of the equation, say, okay, money in. But and we'll talk about this. How did the money come in?
Right.
How did the money come in?
Right.
Through what services? Through whatever. How did the money go out? And is this an acceptable amount of money left? So are people doing a better job? Yes. Are they doing a great job? A majority of them are not.
Right.
And there's opportunity in knowing those numbers.
Okay. So I think you set the baseline pretty good. And I'm sitting here eager beaver to hear what this, what the North Star, I think you call it the gold standard grooming business, looks like, right? Where do you want to start for defining what this North Star is? Obviously, it's not, you're not even going to look at me today and say, hey, Alex, I'm going to talk about just, Fluffy's beauty salon and how they do XYZ, right? Because there might not be someone that does everything perfectly. I mean, odds are there's no one that does everything perfectly. But I want to define what some of these great elements look like. And then towards the end, we can build the path from the baseline towards how to get to each of these, or at least how to build the processes to get to each of these.
Sure.
So let's start with this great grooming business, this gold standard. What does it look like? Where do you want to start? Do you want to start on an organization? Do you want to start on services? Do you want to start
Let's
on
start with people.
people?
Let's just hop right into the people, right?
Let's jump into the people.
We need people. We don't have machines to groom dogs. The
Yep.
day we have machines that groom dogs, we're all out of work, because at that point, you know, right now, you can't get your dog groomed online.
AI is not doing it.
Hopefully not for a long time, right? I mean, Amazon's not grooming your dog, and
No.
and Chewy's not grooming your dog. I mean, everybody, and not a knock to any player in our industry, right? But everybody has their place, right, in our industry. So, but without people, we have no business. In the professional grooming space, it requires skilled labor. I know it's like, duh, right? Of course but that's where we go wrong. That's
Right.
where and that's where the greatest amount of reward and the greatest amount of challenges come in our industry is from people. You know, I've got a phrase I throw on: people can be people-y, right? People are people-y.
Yep.
So as a business owner and a manager, what we have to do is figure out, how do we create an environment where people, especially in an art, creative sort of profession that is professional dog grooming, how do we allow them to still kind of flex that muscle to be the artist, to be the creative type, but not wander off and cause problems for themselves and for the business owner? For example, I've often said, it's like, if you can picture, and again, life is simple, people make it complicated. So what I try to do is bring simple analogies, so to draw a picture,
Yep.
right? Because what happens is, and if you're too close to your business, you're not seeing it, but that's why you need people like Alex and I to help you see it. But imagine it being like a playground. Go to any playground in your community. My guess is that playground has a fence around it.
Yep.
We want the kids to play in an approved, supportive, safe environment, right? We're not going to put spikes on the top or at the end of the slide, right? We're not going to,
have booby traps.
We're not going to grease the monkey bars,
Yeah.
right? We're not going to, we're going to create a safe environment, but then we're going to put this boundary around it.
Okay.
So you can play according to the safe environment, these standards, but there's a boundary. And if you get outside of that, then that's not the place you need to be. That's unsafe, right? So if we can create that environment where people can be successful and those skilled individuals can play,
Yep.
but not run out and get hit by a car, right? That's where the owner operators come in. They set those boundaries, whether it's pricing, whether it's standards, whether it's hours of business, whether it's providing the right equipment, right, for the right dryers and right tubs and that we have to provide that safe space.
Where do you draw the line?
Get hit by a car.
Where do you draw the line as an owner operator to make sure you're not micromanaging? Make sure that boundary is not on the playground, is not right at the bottom of the slide, where sure they can play, but they're going to run right into that fence.
And that comes down to we're going to talk about metrics, right? We'll talk about looking at our numbers. Somebody really, really smart once taught me, what gets measured gets done, right? What gets measured gets done, right? If you're in business, there's dollar signs and decimal points we have to pay attention to, and percentages that we have to pay attention to. Just having money in the bank now, maybe more than you had last week or the week before, the year before, you're still missing out. So this people part, right? So let's talk about the people. This is a skilled position. And there are not enough groomers to go around for the existing businesses or the businesses of tomorrow. Why? Well, because there's a lot of retailers that really like grooming services because it pulls in customers that are going to buy their stuff, right? Collars and leashes and beds. So retailers need groomers. pet supply or pet care facilities, lodging, daycare, training, grooming. They need groomers. Mobile businesses need groomers. Doggy daycare franchises and doggy daycare businesses need groomers. I mean, all of these retail or services businesses in the pet space or even pet supplies need groomers. So rewind time 40 years ago, there still wasn't enough groomers to go around. Now it's even worse because it's just spread too thin. So what do we do as an owner operator to combat that? Well, again, we need skilled labor. I am not a dog groomer. You don't want me to be your dog's groomer, just like you don't want me to be your heart surgeon, right? But I love the industry so much that I stayed in it because I saw some really awesome things happening. If we need skilled labor, I mean, think about it. Again, the equation is very simple. If we need skilled labor to be successful in our grooming services business, and there's not enough skilled labor to go around, we really have three choices. We kick the can down the road and we just say, well, we're just not going to be able to find groomers or whatever. Or we trade groomers like baseball cards, right? And maybe even overpay, right? So that you're the shiny place where somebody wants to come work, right? Versus working somewhere else. So essentially you're stealing or you're losing groomers, or you take some control back and create your own. And I'm not saying any one of those is the only. I think it's this mix of all of those while creating an environment that tells people you want to work here, not there. Here might not be, there might be Target, Walmart, the car wash down the street. I'm talking about any other employer in your market, not just pet care businesses.
Right. What if I don't want, I'm sure a lot of people that listen to the show, their books are full. And for the most part, people want to grow their businesses. But there are some folks that don't, that are perfectly content in the size of their business. Is all this a moot point then? I don't need groomers then. I've got, two I love. Their books are full. My book's full. I don't want to manage somebody else. I'm good to go.
This is what's brilliant about the free market and capitalism. That's totally within their right to say. If they're happy, right? If everything is harmonious amongst their team, if everybody is what they feel is maximizing their income potential, all of that's really great. Now, I will say in supply and demand, right? I was an economics professor for about 5 years, and one of the things that economics 101, when demand exceeds supply, one of the very first things that happens is prices raise. So if you're in an environment like that and you're like, dude, we're all fat and happy, we're great, we've got all the business that we could shake a stick at, we're full, we've got great harmony, we've got a great team, all of these things are great, start raising your prices.
Yeah.
You could even get into a more predictable grooming model and say, listen, if we're only going to do business with customers that will come in every 6 weeks or more frequent. So you can start applying some rules in order then to make your job. Maybe you can groom less, but charge more because you can get that in your market if your quality's there, right? And if your service, your experience, your convenience, all of those things are there, sure. But here's my challenge to you. Let's say in your scenario, you've got 3 people. You've got the owner who might be a groomer as well, maybe a couple of really great, awesome groomers, until one of them gets injured. Or somebody does wave a shiny new, I'm going to overpay you 60% commission to come work for my place, right? Or they have the winning Powerball ticket. I don't know. Uncle Henry dies and leaves them an inheritance. We don't know.
Yeah, right.
What I got to say is that harmony is not permanent.
It's not forever.
And we get sort of wrapped up in thinking all is good. It is until it's not.
Sure.
What are you going to do about that?
So loop back to your original point. I think I cut you off before you finished it. You've got 3 options. You've got the option where you're going to say it is what it is. You've got option 2, which is where you're stealing or losing a groomer in this game of wave the shiny object. Or you've got option 3, which is let's call them raise them, raise them yourself, the homegrown option. And then you said there's not one right answer, but in that menu of options, what are the great businesses doing when they need that a groomer, or even, need to have someone on deck for that past example we were just talking about?
Yep. Really, the best, healthiest, harmonious, succession plan for businesses for stability are focusing on two things. They're focusing on growing their own grooming staff, right? Growing their own grooming staff.
Right.
And they fuel that by focus number two, which is focusing on a bigger, healthier bath business. There is such power in a bath business, right? So now I had 60 dog groomers that worked for me at one point. We did 100,000 grooming appointments a year. 60 dog groomers, 100,000 grooming appointments a year.
That's crazy.
It was crazy, right? Where you think all my hair went, right? But all kidding aside, I learned a lot, right? I failed a lot. I learned a lot.
Right.
But what I learned was that in order to keep that momentum, we had to grow our own. We had to take some of that control back. Would I still welcome a rock star groomer who had awesome skills, who was also a good culture fit and manageable to join the team? 100%. But I wasn't solely dependent on that. See, if that's the case, I'm not taking any control of my business whatsoever. I'm just sort of hoping, wishing, and praying somebody just lands in my lap, which happens sometimes.
Okay, so this is perfect then. This is a good bridge to the service side from the people side. So to wrap up the people side, the great businesses, they're using the plethora of those three options that we talked about. But unless you have a plan to home grow, and let's put quotes in that, whatever that might mean, hiring someone like you guys, like Paragon, having an apprentice program, or, teaching them yourself somehow, right? Unless you have a plan in mind to homegrown groomers, you do not, in your words, Joe, fully own or control your business. And I like that, because that, if we're assuming that labor is the linchpin here, if you do not have a plan for that, you're kind of just hoping you're in the elements, right? That's the people side. That's what great businesses are doing on the people side. Now you dropped a very interesting Easter egg there, that the second thing that great businesses are doing, now this is on the service side, is building a phenomenal bath business. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what that means and how, and like, what does that look like? Are you, in my head, are you just saying, hey, let's add a few more bath options and let's start selling them like they're full service haircuts?
Yes and yes, no and no, a little bit. So essentially it really is. And again, this is what I love about our industry. I don't have to be a rocket scientist. I don't have to be a brain surgeon to be successful in our business, and neither do any of you out there, right? That's what's brilliant about this, right? So I'm going to give you a really simple equation.
Okay.
And that is, I get asked all the time, how do I find more groomers?
Yep.
Well, I say, first off, is stop only looking for experienced groomers. So now we're going to now entertain at least the thought of growing our own in whatever method you were talking about, right? Well, how do I do that? Well, it starts with the bath business.
Okay.
Right? How do we focus on something that does not require the level of skill that full service haircuts do? Because no matter who you are out there who might be a professional groomer, or owner operators who might not be professional groomers, but you manage, lead, and operate a business with professional groomers, they didn't land on this planet. And for all of you groomers, you didn't land on this planet as a professional groomer.
Right.
You first started in some sort of underling position, whether you were called a bather brusher, whether you were called an assistant, whether you were called a bather, whatever that looks like, prepper, whatever, right?
For sure.
You had to build your skills. Grooming, professional grooming, is a legitimate trade, just like plumbers and electricians and carpenters. They had to learn those skills as well. So if you focus on growing a bath business, then you need this starter set, this entry-level position. Now, at Paragon, we call those groom techs, right? Because as a groom tech, even the title sort of implies this person is most likely going to pursue a path to become a groomer, sort of like a dental technician or a veterinary technician, vet techs, right? So, but at Paragon, we call them groom techs. I don't really care. I don't care what you call them, but that's really that's the role that they serve.
Yep.
Right. So one of the key elements of every successful grooming business, the most successful grooming businesses, is legitimizing a groom tech position who does full service baths. When I mean full service baths, of course, it's the labs and the pugs and the chihuahuas, right? The wash and wear dogs. But I'm talking the golden retrievers that need their Grinch feet trimmed, or their pads being shaved out, or the sanitary trim, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are not superpowers that only groomers can possess. Groom techs can be taught safely how to do this. I mean, I grew future groomers from groom techs well before I ever even knew about Paragon.
Mm-hmm.
It's just now that Paragon has, and again, not a commercial for Paragon, but now we just have a consistent way of helping employers do that.
Sure.
Right? But regardless, we were growing our own groom techs into groomers. So what's the magic bean? How do you get customers who own labs and pugs and goldens to bring their dogs to a professional grooming salon? Because again, in their mind, they think grooming is only for haircut dogs. But now we've established grooming as full spectrum, right?
Yeah.
Full service baths as well. How do you get the customers? Well, true, pet wellness, but how do you get them to come in? Shed control. It's all about shedding. There's one common pain point among all bath breeds, most bath breeds at least, all might be, I don't think that's an overstretch, is shedding. Help them create a process to help them overcome or not or reduce the amount of shedding hair in their home. Now we've got a bath customer who's bringing their pet in at the same interval or frequency as a trim breed. And if they're bringing them in at more of that frequency, you need groom techs to do them, because you wouldn't give a lab or a pug or you wouldn't give that dog to a groomer. If you give that dog to a groomer to do, the groomer's trained to do grooming, haircuts. So any minutes that we assign them a bath, we're actually hijacking that haircut appointment. Let them do what they're trained to do and pay them very well to do that, but hire a legitimate team of groom techs and grow them. And some of them will become tomorrow's groomers. So shed control and baths and groom techs. That's the recipe.
I mean, really though, the magic bean is having this position that is this groom tech, bather, whatever we want to call it, as you said, because not only does this solve our labor issue, but it also brings in an entire untapped market of customers to our business.
Absolutely. Think about the metrics here just for a moment. A trained groom tech can generate, and this is not pie in the sky, this is reality.
Right.
A trained groom tech can generate the same amount of revenue as a trained groomer in the day. But a groomer might be making, let's just for spits and giggles put it out there, a groomer's making 50%. Well, a groom tech could be paid very well and still only be making the equivalent, like an hourly equivalent of 25%. So if they're both generating the same amount of revenue in a day, and one is making the equivalent of 25%, and one is making, let's say, 50% commission, your wages to sales ratio, which you do need to know this number. This is one of those very, very important numbers. Your wages to sales ratio is under 40%.
And that's the magic line, right?
You could never get there if all you had was a haircut business and you're paying your groomers 50%. You could never get below 40%.
Right.
Groom techs doing bath business and shed control add-ons, mind blow.
Let's pull on that thread a little bit. I'm a business owner. I'm intrigued. I have someone perfect on deck to start this off with. Okay. What does this look like when you say, shed control in a full service bath? Am I offering, all right, hey, to my menu of options, I'm going to offer this full service bath that's meant for anyone and everyone. I'm going to price it, accordingly for what it would take to do a full service bath. And then I offer a shed control solution, or in your eyes, what have you seen that fits this puzzle piece of offerings here?
Yeah. So you've got full service groom. I like things simple.
Yep.
I
Give it to me
don't like,
simple. Me too, man.
I don't like this level groom, that level
Me
groom, this level
neither,
groom,
man.
this level bath, this level, right? You know,
Drives me
all the
crazy.
bundles and all of
Yeah.
the, right? We don't have to get cutesy with this. Let's just make it simple, right?
Mhm.
I've got another, what my clients call Joeism, right? And my Joeism, be careful what you create because you have to manage it.
Oh yeah. And when someone calls in and wants to know what it costs to groom their dog, and you got to run them through a game of 20 questions.
Crazy, right?
Crazy.
I mean, we're not talking, again, we're not rocket scientists
Yeah.
and we're not brain surgeons,
Right.
right? We don't need to make our business appear that way. And then our customers get confused because a confused mind never buys, right? So we got to keep it streamlined, right? So to your point, full service haircut. I have a 12-pound Shih Tzu. His name is Vinny, right? He gets a full service groom.
So Vinny
Full
gets so
service
the
groom,
Vinny cut.
right? Then you've got full service bath. The full service bath is for those golden retrievers, the labs, the pugs, whatever, right? That's if they need their feet trimmed, we trim them. If they need their pads trimmed,
Yep.
we shave out their pads. We do the sanitary. That's full service bath. And then shed control. Shed control, in my opinion, shed control is a promotable primary service type.
And what does that include? Is that bathe and brush?
Well, so imagine it this way. Imagine here's how a lot of businesses that do baths position some sort of shedding treatment, right? So they'll say, yeah, we'll do a bath. And did you want us to do a de-shed?
Right. And that's
the
what I've
de-shed
heard.
is always this add-on.
Shampoo.
Yeah. It's an over-reliance on a shampoo that doesn't do what the label says it's even capable of doing.
You would know. Yep.
I would know. Or it's an over-reliance on tools, and then we all of a sudden what ends up happening is we're brushing, we're combing, we're raking, we're ferminating, we're doing all this, and all of a sudden what you know is then the dog's coat is either thin or they've got irritated skin, all of these things.
Yep.
The only way to get customers, in my opinion, in my experience, the way to get customers to bring their dogs into your business with their bath breeds is to not say bath first, de-shed second as an add-on, right? A barnacle to the hull, right? Advertise shed control treatments. The bath just happens to come along with that. So instead of it being bath, de-shed, make it shed control, because everybody else is doing de-shed and it really doesn't de anything. We're not eliminating shedding. We're trying to control it. We're trying to manage it. Right. And what we're putting in the customer's mind is that they have to bring their dog in regularly so we can do what? Control it, manage it.
Well, so, and also what you're doing, to the customer expectations point, if you're telling someone you're going to do a de-shed, you and I both know that you're never going to be perfect and you're not really doing a de-shed, right? So it's at the end of the day, you're kind of subconsciously eliminating trust between your client and you. They paid for a de-shed one time. They're not going to pay for that again when they come back. It's like, this didn't really work.
That's right. That's right. So, I mean, it's a combination. The actual process takes a little bit longer to explain, but it's a really simple process. It's a lot of use of the high velocity blower. Mm-hmm. It's minimal use of liquid products. It's a minimal use of shedding tools, right? Mm-hmm. Because shedding tools can break hair. Shedding tools can irritate skin, cause bald spots, thin spots, all of that. High velocity air moving both before and after the bath is key. So and we've got more information on shed control treatment and the process and things at Paragon that we can help enlighten the audience, the listeners, the watchers too as well. Sure. But from the business perspective, shed control, full service baths. Shed control, full service baths, and groom techs.
Yep. Shed control, full service baths, and groom techs. So if we were to split up the service lines then from the org structure, you've got your highly skilled professional groomers managing the full service cuts. And then you've got your groom techs or whatever version we call that, managing the shed control and the full service baths. That full service baths and shed control turns into a heavy profit line, while at the same time it solves our labor problem because it's a pipeline where we don't need that highly skilled, highly experienced, highly expensive full service groomer until we do. And so they'll slot in to almost our mini, let's call it training program over in the full service baths and shed control. And then when we do need them or when they express the desire to make that move up, They move right into our same business. We're no longer competing versus other people. We're no longer having to hire that extremely expensive, experienced groomer. We've trained them in-house.
That's right. That's right.
Golden bean, man. I love it. All right. So we've talked about what this great business looks like. We talked about where we came from. Let's put back on my owner hat. I've listened to this now, Joe, and I'm like, dude, I've taken a full pen and paper of notes. How do I get to that great level business? I mean, maybe let's start high level. What are some, you've talked about metrics. What are some metrics I, as a business owner, could start tracking tomorrow, today even, to get this next level of insight, this understanding, so I'm not confused on my business level of understanding, so I can start to make those next steps?
Yeah. So, and again, we are benefited that most people are using a computer software solution.
Yep.
But the solution itself doesn't, like, you don't turn it on day one and it knows your business, right? So we've inputted a lot of data, a lot of structure into it. How much revenue comes from full service grooms? How much revenue comes from full service baths? How much revenue comes from add-ons, the specific add-ons? If you do teeth brushing and a conditioner and a nail filing, how much revenue came from each one of those? So you need to put these line items in your software program so that these are reportable, right?
Exactly.
All of the, you don't just, there's so many times, Alex, I'll start working with a consulting client, because I do a lot of consulting on the outside of Paragon, and I'll work with them and I'll get a financial statement and it just says grooming. And then it has
different numbers,
labor,
each transaction too.
I said, great, break that grooming out. Well, I don't have it broken out. I'm like, okay, number one, we got to be able to report on all of those line items. Number one. The other piece is how many of each of those in that period of time, right? Because what we're trying to drive toward is an average ticket price.
Yep.
So we're going to add up all of our appointments, we're going to add up all of our revenue, and we're going to divide revenue by appointments, and we're going to have our average ticket price. That is where we start from.
That's where we start, because to make our journey to that great business, we're going to probably take that number, if I had to guess, and we're going to we're going to mess with all the factors, mess with the inputs, mess with the ingredients, so we can get that little number to start raising a little bit.
That is exactly right. And there's to your point, there's a lot of things to work on with that, much simpler than what you would imagine, but there's a lot of things to work on to that. So that's the very first thing is the revenue in.
Yep.
How did the revenue come in?
Yep.
And at what quantity? Now we're going to need to talk about revenue out, or money in. Now money out, revenue doesn't go out. Money in, money out, right?
Right.
Money out. Number one cost factor, wages.
Right.
So we need to be able to say, okay, I've got 2 groomers and 2 groom techs. My 2 groomers worked for whatever period of time they worked. Yes, groomers should clock in and out, even if they're commission.
Mic drop.
They have to.
And why is that important?
And this is why, exactly. This is why. Because if we know, let's say Gina, our groomer, did X number of dogs, and again, your software tells you that X number of appointments, the total amount of revenue that Gina was responsible for during this period of time, we need how many hours did she work? Because without that piece, we can't sit down and do what I'm going to recommend is a monthly check-in with every single one of our grooming staff, groomers and groom techs. 10 minutes. It's a standing appointment. I only talked to my groomers when something went wrong. I regret that. That's one of my failures. But if every month we had a standing 10-minute check-in, I'm going to take the hours worked and I'm going to work in the calculation against the number of appointments. And I'm going to be able to say to Gina, your average hours per pet were X. How do you feel about that? Were you rushed? Did you have some bandwidth? Is there room for improvement? Because if you can improve, even by X minutes per dog, that could be 1 more dog a week, which equals another dog a day or another dog a week, which equals some sort of financial gain for both of us.
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
after a period of time.
That's right. I mean, your groomers especially, I mean, they want to make more money. They want to provide. They want to build their book too. So it's a win-win, and it only starts with what you just said, which is you can't even start to take steps without understanding where you're currently at.
That's right. So, and again, your software will tell you this if you have the right structure built in your software. So Gina, I'm going to be able to tell how many hours she worked during this period of time. In that same period of time, how many appointments did she generate? And in that same period of time, what was the revenue from all of that? Now, here's the complication though, Alex. If Gina had helpers, like bathers or assistants, there's no way we can ever help her maximize her income potential, because we don't know how much time she actually spent with each one of those dogs. We could speculate, but it's just not going to be accurate enough. So by having, in my model, in the gold standard grooming model, everybody does their own dog start to finish. Groom techs do their own dog start to finish. Groomers do their own dog start to finish. Because if we're paying a groomer 50% commission, and then we're giving them an assistant who might take 15 minutes or so, a $20 an hour person taking 15 minutes, that's another $5. You add that on. We're not even making, we're barely making any money on the haircuts at all.
Yeah.
And the other operational challenge is if a groomer has an assistant, when things go right, it's great. But when things go wrong, like the butt is still dirty, the face is still greasy, they bathed the dogs out of order, the dog wasn't properly brushed out, the dog wasn't dry enough, all of those operational challenges evaporate.
Yeah. And I go back, as you say that, in my head to the original point you made, within the first few minutes of the episode here, where you said people will do people-y things, right? I think I may have butchered exactly how you said that, but you get what I'm saying, right?
People can be people-y.
People can be people-y, right? And at the end of the day, if you're involving two people, you have double the risk of people being people-y, right? Good or bad, that's just going to happen. You have double the exposure to it, which can derail, your goals and your business and client experience and all that sort of stuff. Joe, before we wrap up, you've been in the business for a while, and it's not often we get to hear from people like you and listen to things you've seen and learned and, even expected. So what I want to do real quick is I just want to hear your take for where you think this like gold star business or how this great business, how it evolves over time. It's 2024. We talked about it a little bit where like at the end of the day, with all of these technological innovations and Amazon and all that sort of stuff, people still need dog groomers. People still need, skilled laborers to take care of their pets. Let's leave it broad. Where does the world of pet grooming go from today on?
Yep. I believe the reality might match to a certain degree what my hope is. And my hope is that we continue, because I've seen this, and that's why I think that reality is linked to my vision, right? My vision, in my email signature, I say, how do you define vision? It's what does it look like when it's done correctly, right? So if you can kind of frame in what does it look like when it's done correctly, so the universe of professional pet grooming services looks like an elevation of the professionalism in the industry. It's okay not to have the craziest mad grooming skills, but be working toward those, right? To be your best self. But along the way, understanding that what carries even more weight than what we might think is the way that we treat our customers and that whole customer experience factor, that CX factor, right? That will cut us a lot of slack if we are at best an average groomer, right?
I love it. Yeah. And I mean, to wrap things up here, I want to go back to one of the main highlights, honestly, of this conversation that I had is that you're serving the 80% no matter what, right? For the most part, if you're in 80% of the business, you're serving the 80%. And what matters there to be a great, phenomenal gold star grooming business, you do the average things great, and you do the customer experience above average, right? You do those two things well, I think you're in an upper echelon of grooming businesses. And I love the way that you put that earlier. It's stuck in my head throughout this entire conversation.
Yeah. And again, focusing on that bath business to grow our groom techs who will become tomorrow's groomers.
Yep. Love it. If you guys want to learn more, obviously, about Joe and what he does and what he's learned, like I said, he's the president of Paragon Pet. It's at Joe? ParagonPetSchool.com. And then for independent groomers that may have stuck out this more business heavy episode with us, LearnToGroomDogs.com as well. A great educational resource. And if anyone ever wants to get a hold of Joe, Joe's in our Facebook group. You can reach out to me and I'll connect you with Joe directly. Joe, dude, you're the man. Like I said, even before we hit record, we could talk for hours, soaking up all the knowledge you have. So we'd love to have you back on at some point soon.
Well, we love helping people, and I love helping business owners, whether it's developing their people through Paragon or some consulting services. So listen, from this point forward, I want the audience to know you got a guy.
Yeah. You got a guy.
You're not on an island. You're just not on an island. There's an answer there. And if I don't have it, I'll point you in a direction. That's what this is about. That's how Alex and you and I got to know each other that way.
That's right. That's right. Well, Joe, thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.